Before karma, before compassion, and long before the gentle teachings of Buddhism spread across Asia, there existed a far darker world. It was a world governed not by moral balance, but by raw, immediate, and terrifying forces. Long before temples and scriptures, people believed the land itself was alive, inhabited by unseen entities who demanded blood, obedience, and fear. This documentary explores the brutal beliefs that shaped ancient Asia, from the Himalayas to the islands of the Indonesian archipelago. We will uncover a time when human sacrifice was a civic duty, when mental illness was a spiritual crime, and when your own ancestors could be your deadliest enemies. Learn why forests were seen as predatory hunters, why women were considered gateways for demonic forces, and why the only justice was instant, unforgiving punishment, based on archaeological evidence, ancient chronicles, and folkloric traditions that have survived for millennia. This video reveals the invisible terror that ruled the lives of millions. If you are fascinated by ancient history, spiritual evil, and the hidden fears that underpin modern cultures, this story will forever change how you see Asia's past. Before the concepts of karma or cosmic justice existed, the world was understood through a terrifyingly simple contract. The spirits owned everything. The forests, the rivers, the mountains, and even the ground beneath your feet were not merely landscapes. They were the sovereign territories of powerful, unseen guardians. These were not benevolent deities, but volatile rulers who controlled harvests, health, and survival itself. To anger them was to invite famine, disease, madness, or the death of a child. Appeasement was not a choice, it was a necessity. To ensure the stability of a new village, the strength of a bridge, or the success of an irrigation system, a blood price had to be paid. Across Southeast Asia, China, the Himalayas, and parts of India, this price was often human life. Slaves, captives of war, children, or widows were buried alive under the foundations of city gates, fortress walls, and royal palaces. This practice, known as foundational sacrifice, was believed to bind a protective spirit to the structure, transforming a human soul into an eternal guardian. This brutal logic dictated that for a community to live, an individual had to die, their life force sealing a pact with the earth's spirits. In Southeast Asia, this ancient belief in land spirits never truly vanished. It evolved. The gruesome tradition of blood sacrifice was eventually replaced by symbolic offerings, giving rise to the spirit houses, or san pray fum, that are ubiquitous today. These miniature shrines are the direct descendants of a prehistoric worldview, where blood was the only currency the spirits would accept. In this pre-modern world, what we now understand as mental illness was never a medical condition. It was a spiritual verdict, a public sign of guilt. A person suffering from depression, psychosis, or erratic behavior was not seen as sick, but as possessed. This possession signified a grave transgression. You had offended an ancestor, violated a powerful taboo, or trespassed on forbidden, spirit-inhabited land. The spirit world was not forgiving, and its punishment was to seize control of your mind and body, turning you into a vessel for its wrath. Consequently, the cure was not medicine, but punishment, designed to expel the possessing entity through extreme suffering. Rituals involved brutal beatings to make the body an inhospitable host. Starvation was used to weaken the spirit within. Isolation and public shaming were employed to break the victim's and the spirit's will. Exorcisms were often agonizing ordeals, where pain was the primary tool of healing. For countless individuals across mainland Southeast Asia and southern China, these cures were a death sentence. Many did not survive the very rituals intended to save them, succumbing to the violence of their own community's fear. Today, we revere our ancestors as gentle protectors, watching over us from a peaceful afterlife. But in ancient China, Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia, ancestors were figures of immense power and potential terror. They were not distant guardians, but active, demanding members of the household who could kill their own descendants. An angry ancestor was believed to be the source of life's greatest calamities: unexplained infertility, creeping madness, sudden crop failures, or the abrupt death of a family member. The spirits of the dead held the living in a grip of fear. The entire family could be punished for the transgression of a single individual. Disobeying an elder, failing to perform the correct funerary rites, or neglecting offerings could invite a swift and deadly response from beyond the grave. This belief system created cultures of absolute, unquestioning obedience rooted not in respect, but in mortal fear. The authority of the family patriarch and the village elders was absolute because their decisions were believed to maintain the fragile peace with the spirit world. A single act of defiance was not just a personal mistake. It was an act that could doom the entire lineage. In the animist traditions of Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, and Indonesia, the forest was not a neutral space of trees and wildlife. It was a conscious, living entity with its own intentions, and it was a predator. The jungle was the domain of spirits that actively hunted humans. These entities were believed to target the vulnerable, lone travelers who had strayed from the path, children who wandered too far from the village, and especially women whose life-giving biology was thought to attract unseen forces. Pregnant women and menstruating women were considered particularly susceptible, their bodies emitting a spiritual energy that drew the attention of hungry spirits. The people of this time believed the forest could literally consume a person's soul. Getting lost was not a simple accident or a matter of poor navigation. It was interpreted as the forest having accepted you, pulling you into its supernatural domain from which there was no escape. Your disappearance was a spiritual event, not a physical one. This ancient terror of the predatory wilderness survives today in the folklore of the region, embodied by ghostly figures like the Phai Kong Koi of Thailand, a one-legged jungle ghost that hops along sucking blood from the toes of sleeping campers. The Suasaming, a spirit tigger that can take human form to lure victims deep into the woods. And the Orangbunian of Malaysia and Indonesia, a race of beautiful, elusive forest people who steal children and lead humans astray into their invisible world. Throughout pre-Buddhist Asia, the female body was widely seen as a physical threshold to the spirit world, a living gateway through which dangerous forces could enter the human realm. This perception made women's biology a source of profound spiritual anxiety. Menstruation was not a natural cycle, but a period of spiritual pollution, believed to attract malevolent spirits and drain a community's protective power. During this time, women were often isolated, barred from entering sacred areas or even cooking for their families, lest they contaminate the household. Childbirth, the ultimate act of creation, was also seen as the moment of greatest peril. The process of birth was thought to open a metaphysical doorway between the world of the living and the world of spirits, allowing demons and hungry ghosts to slip through. This made both mother and newborn incredibly vulnerable to spiritual attack. Widows were considered particularly cursed, their status as a woman who had lost her husband seen as a sign of spiritual imbalance or bad luck. In some societies, this belief had horrific consequences, leading to practices where widows were isolated, forced through painful purification rites, or in some extreme cases, predating Hindu influence, buried or burned alive with their deceased husbands to appease the spirit world and prevent them from becoming a conduit for misfortune. In the world before Buddhism, there was no karma, no cycle of rebirth where justice would eventually be served. There was no overarching moral balance in the universe. There was only the here and now, governed by the volatile whims of spirits who delivered instant and brutal retaliation. If something terrible happened to you, if your crops failed, your child fell ill, or your house burned down, it was not bad luck. It was punishment. You deserved it. Your family deserved it. Or your entire village deserved it. There was no concept of forgiveness, only appeasement. Guilt was collective, and disaster was a sign that the spirits had been offended. This worldview created a cycle of constant anxiety, where every action was weighed against the possibility of immediate, supernatural retribution. If a storm destroyed a village, it was because someone had broken a taboo. If a plague swept through a community, it was because the local guardian spirit had not been properly honored. The only recourse was to identify the transgression and make an offering, often in the form of a sacrifice, to quell the spirit's anger. There was no higher moral court of appeal, no promise of a better next life, only a desperate, ongoing negotiation with terrifying, unseen forces. Some spirits were not content with simple offerings of fruit or incense. They demanded blood, flesh, and organs. In parts of ancient India, the Himalayas, and Southeast Asia, certain deities and nature spirits were believed to be cannibalistic. They fed on the life force of humans, growing stronger from the pain and terror of their victims. Rituals dedicated to these entities were designed to satiate their horrific appetites. People believed that these spirits actively fed on fear and that the suffering of a sacrifice amplified its power, making the offering more potent. These ancient beliefs in flesh-eating and blood-drinking spirits did not disappear. Instead, they were absorbed into later religious systems and transformed into the monstrous figures of Asian mythology. The bloodthirsty nature spirits of animist belief evolved into the Raikasosis of Hindu lore, flesh-eating demons who haunted forests and preyed on humans. They became the Praetas or hungry ghosts of Buddhist cosmology, tormented spirits with an insatiable hunger for grotesque substances. And in Southeast Asia, they gave rise to a terrifying menagerie of ghoulish entities, such as the Layak of Bali and the Aswang of the Philippines, shape-shifting creatures of the night that feast on the unborn and the dead. The arrival of Buddhism from India fundamentally changed this landscape of terror. It introduced a radical new idea. Suffering had a rational cause, desire, and attachment, not a supernatural curse. For the first time, compassion replaced terror as a central spiritual principle. The concept of karma offered a system of cosmic justice that replaced the random, immediate punishment of angry spirits. A person's fate was now tied to their own moral actions, not the whims of a territorial ghost. Monks, with their teachings of liberation, began to replace shamans and their rituals of appeasement. Offerings of flowers and incense replaced offerings of blood. The world was no longer an arbitrary, terrifying place. Many of the ghosts and demons that haunt Asia today are, in fact, the cultural leftovers of these pre-Buddhist fears. They are the ancient spirits of the land, the forest, and the ancestors, reinterpreted through a new moral lens. They are the lingering shadows of a time ruled not by compassion, but by a deep and pervasive fear of the unseen world. Thank you for watching. If this journey into Asia's ancient past has revealed a new perspective, please consider subscribing to our channel for more stories that explore the hidden histories and forgotten beliefs that continue to shape our world.